The next thing I want to talk about is our 3-on buffer mandrel. Now this mandrel, as you can see, is 3/4 inch steel mandrel, and it has all 3 buffs mounted on it. Now we've recently made some changes in this mandrel. When we first started making it, we had it threaded on both ends and had a couple of nuts here, a lock nut and a regular nut, and they held this end of the setup, and the other end had another nut, and they tightened up against those two, and that held all the wheels in place. We did find out, though, after we started making the first mandrel, that the threads that were in here, partially down to the number 2 Morse taper, had little burrs on them, and sometimes they would jam in the lathe spindle. So the first thing we did was to deburr those threads, and that worked pretty well. But recently we decided that we would change it and take the threads off here altogether. So instead of using threads and a nut down here, we're using this shaft collar, and that holds this end, and then there is a nut against the other end. And you'll also notice in this end here there is a center, and that's where your tailstock from your lathe, or your lathe tailstock, will go to hold the other end of the mandrel. Now we also recently decided to make it a little bit shorter. We made it 1 inch shorter than we used to have it because it just barely fits in a jet mini lathe. But it will fit in quite well now, and you've got a little bit more here to grab a hold of it. So you can put it in your lathe, tighten it up like that, and then when you turn it on, and we're running this at 1800 RPMs on our lathe, which is fine. That's a good speed for it. And now you have all 3 buffs here ready to go, and it just saves you a little bit of time. Now these buffs, I've also sanded them just like it did my other buff with the shop vac, so that they are less dirty. I'm not going to demonstrate this, but you can all see how this works, and it's been very popular. It's a good seller, and we can recommend it. Another real popular buffing product that we sell are these bowl buffs. They're made so that they are round on the end, and that allows you to get down inside a bowl or a goblet or some hollow form that you want to polish the inside, and there's nothing there to cause you problems inside, no screws or any hard surfaces on the outside of this thing to do that. Now we make them in 3 different sizes. This is the 3-inch size here. You'll notice on the back side of them they are color coded. These are Delrin cups that the wheels are pulled down into to make the mushroom shape. This one is white for the white diamond, this one's yellow for the wax, and this one's red for the Tripoli, and that's how you tell them apart. Because on the 3-inch and the 4-inch bowl buffs, the material, just like on our large wheels, changes from one type of buff to the other. There's linen, and flannel, and then all flannel. So we want to make sure that you don't get them mixed up. Once you start putting the compound on, of course, you can always tell which one the Tripoli is because it's red. But the other two, the buffs themselves don't change color with the addition of the wax or the white diamond compound. Now, back here we have the other sizes. Here is the 4-inch, which is quite a bit bigger. Of course, you don't need a buff as big as the inside of your bowl. A small buff will do a big bowl, but a big buff won't fit into a small bowl. So those are the things you have to consider. Now, in order to mount these buffs and use them, you need to have more speed than on our standard buffing system, because 1725 is fine for an 8-inch diameter buff. When you get down to a 2-inch diameter buff, your surface speed is reduced quite a bit, and it won't really buff enough to do a good job. So you need to speed it up, and that's why we suggest that you use the bowl buffs on your lathe. In order to put them into a lathe, you need a holder here. And what I've got here is a number 2 Morse taper on one end, and this is a special adapter we make for this purpose. On the other end is a 5/8 stub. And then we take our standard buffer adapter that comes with our regular buffer kits, And you slide that on there and tighten up. It's got a flat place on top, and tighten up your set screws, and then you can put this right into your lathe like that. If you're a little concerned about this coming out of your lathe, because it is just in there on a taper fit, if you feel like you want it to be a little more secure, the back end of this number 2 Morse taper has a threaded hole, and it will take a 1/4-20 thread. You can buy 1/4-20 all thread at any hardware store, and you can cut a little piece of that, put it into your lathe with a nut and a washer on the back end, and that will lock this in so it can't possibly come out. And that's probably a good idea, although they do seem to stay in perfectly well, and I've never had any problem much with them coming out. Now I want to make sure that my speed is, right now we're running this up around 3,000 RPM, or pretty close to it. And that's a good speed because now you've got plenty of surface speed for your buff. Now you can sand these a little bit too when you first start using them. It certainly wouldn't hurt, and you can see how much fuzz I'm getting off of there. I'll use my shop vac and try to clean this one up a little bit. Ah. That's the way you do that. If you don't do it, you'll get a face full of lint. Okay. Now, if you've got a bowl that you need to buff the inside of, you want to shine it up like this one. Now, this has already been buffed. I'm not going to clean all of the polish off of that because it looks pretty good. But the process is very simple. You just put your compound on here, and then you go inside and go around like that. And that'll just do a wonderful job of polishing up the inside of your bowl, just like this. And that's our bowl buff.